Hello and welcome. Hey guys, what's going on? James here, and in this video, or I guess I should say live stream, it's episode 2 of the MrBucsNation podcast. Joining me as the co-host of this lovely show that we started last week, Billy from Will_Walsh_NFL. You guys can go subscribe to him. It is at the top of the description of this live stream. Billy, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you for that lovely introduction, James. Maybe next week I'll have to introduce you and I'll have to come up with something fantastic.
I had to rip off your intro. I like the hello and welcome that you do.
Thanks, man. I appreciate
I
that.
love it. But listen, Billy, we've got a lot to talk about today, right? A couple of things that I just discovered right before we started this live stream, okay? First one is a pretty non-serious... Well, actually, the first one is a borderline crime, I guess I should say, from Detroit Lions wide receiver Jameson Williams. Billy, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
This
So,
is the surprise, right?
yes. Well, actually, yeah, I'm going to show everybody on the live stream first, and then I'm going to share my screen. Actually, no, yes, I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me, folks. Okay. So, Billy, can you see the screen that I am looking at?
Oh,
So,
yes, and
so Billy has now seen this. Now I'm going to go ahead and show everybody else. So let me go ahead and get off of the screen sharing real quick so that I can show all you lovely folks. So, for those of you who do not know, Jameson Williams has committed a crime worthy of life in prison, in my opinion. Jameson Williams combines his Oreo McFlurry with his cheeseburger. Oh my. There's photographic proof right there, Billy. There's not much more to say. Horrific. Horrific circumstances. I love the first tweet was, "Aight, man, lock him up now." And then there was another one that had said, I guess I can't see it. There was another tweet that had said, like, hey, I really appreciate everything that he was trying to do getting back. With that being said, trade him now.
I'm really curious if maybe that's a thing. Is that a
No,
thing?
there's no way that's a
I don't
thing.
know. I mean, obviously, I think we've all
No, whatever
all
you're
we've
about to say, you're wrong.
no. Hear me out. We've all like seen people or ourselves dipped like French fries in a frosty.
Yeah.
That's a thing. So maybe this is the burger version.
This is playing God too far. Too far. Point being said, though, is that is one thing. A second thing I want to talk about real quick before we get to the topic of the video on a more interesting note, Billy, which is actually like, ooh, could be interesting. There was a release today by the New York Jets. A running back was released by the New York Jets, literally just an hour and a half ago. That running back was Michael Carter, who was the third string running back for the New York Jets. He's now a free agent. He heads to the waivers. Michael Carter's an interesting back, Billy. I think that he is a guy who could potentially be an option for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the running back position. All things considered, the backup running backs have not been very good, Billy. They have not.
Well,
It's been a bit of a dicey situation, so to speak. No guys really set themselves apart. What do you think about the idea of Michael Carter potentially
that's
joining?
super interesting one. Michael Carter's pretty underrated as far as like a third string running back because you obviously have Hall and then Dalvin Cook. So as far as a third guy on the depth chart, that's a good piece. For those of you who don't know, I was born in New York. I have a lot of Jet fan friends, and I stay kind of in touch with the Jets. That's an underrated player for a backup player. He is underrated. I think it'd be a very interesting move for the Bucs to make, especially because, like you said, the backup running back position. I know on the depth chart now, Edmonds has clearly established himself as the two, but that's only on the depth chart. On the field, it's been Rashad White and just a bunch of bodies, essentially. Your pro Carter coming in?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. You take a look, his lowest yards per average he had for a year was 3.5. That's with the New York Jets, keep in mind, right? But what's more interesting to me is his first 2 years of his career, he had over 50 targets in each of the first 2 years. I know Rachaad White's a great receiving back, and I agree 1,000% with that. But it's always nice to have a good versatile backup running back. If the Buccaneers do have, I would at least be happy if the Buccaneers put in a claim on Michael Carter. Could get rid of Keyshawn Vaughn, perhaps, as an option.
Sean Tucker has not played since week 3.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since Sean Tucker has seen legitimate game action. So even if they're bullish on Keyshawn Vaughn still, and obviously Edmonds isn't going anywhere, Sean Tucker has not seen the field all that much. And yeah, Michael Carter, he's been in the league a long enough time. He's a veteran, and has made plays for it, like you said, a questionable Jets organization.
That's kind of an understatement. I just saw today last night. It was like right after the game, the New York Jets were like, "We're staying with Zach Wilson," and I was like, "Why? Why do you do this to yourselves, guys?"
Can we turn this into a Jets stream and just talk about Zach Wilson and the New York Jets?
We'd be here for hours. But speaking of quarterbacks, Billy, we're here actually today. The actual point of this video is to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback, Baker Mayfield. And we've actually brought up Baker Mayfield a couple of times throughout the year, right? Some people have been divisive on Baker, I think. And today I want to talk about the question of, is Baker Mayfield the guy for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? It's the title of the podcast episode, and it's something that I think is worth exploring, Billy. So let's kind of start off the conversation before we kind of take a look at the chat by just asking this very vague general question. What has been your impression of Baker Mayfield so far, 9 games into the year?
I think my impression, that is very vague. I love that. I would say Baker Mayfield is what I would have hoped he would be, what I thought he could be. I think on any given Sunday, he's roughly the 12th to 17th best quarterback in the NFL. I have no delusions of him being a top 5 quarterback at any point in his career, none whatsoever. But it's disingenuous to say he's a bottom 5 or bottom 10 quarterback at the same time. And that is kind of what I had envisioned Baker Mayfield being when he came to the team. How about yourself?
I think overall, I'm going to go as far as to say that Baker Mayfield has exceeded my expectations in terms of what I've seen, right? And look, guys, me and Billy do always try to be non-biased. We are fans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but we do try to have non-biased opinions on this. And I think whenever you look at the overall stats, you look at what we've seen from Baker Mayfield, it's been a pretty different Baker Mayfield than what we saw last year with the Carolina Panthers. And, saw a little bit of an improvement with the LA Rams, right? But Baker, is he back? Is Baker back? I don't know, man. It's a legitimate question because from all the things that I've seen so far from Baker this year, there's been a lot of good things to see, right? And it's just an interesting question, right? It is. It's been an interesting situation. I've enjoyed watching Baker Mayfield as the quarterback of the Bucs. He has kept this team entertaining. He has kept them competitive for the most part, minus a couple of games, minus a game here, a game there. And he's not making consistent mistakes. 1 point to Mark says Baker has been inconsistent. The line and running game have a lot to do with that. Let's talk about that, Billy. First, let's talk about the things that you do like about Baker Mayfield, and then let's talk about the things that you do not like about Baker Mayfield. So let's start with the things that you do like.
Things I like about Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield, strong arm. I think that's nice. It's important. It's not like the end-all be-all for quarterbacks. You can obviously function without a strong arm, but it's nice to have one. I like the fact that he has a really nice ability to extend some plays when he has to, right? The Bucs offensive line has definitely had some tough moments this season, and Baker Mayfield could have a lot more sacks taken than he does. He's able to buy himself a little bit of time. Sometimes he scrambles to throw. Sometimes he scrambles to take off and run. I like having that in the offense. As much as Tom Brady has been, Tom Brady he's the GOAT, but that's something that was missing the last couple of years, having a mobile quarterback or a quasi-mobile quarterback. I also like that. I like how Baker Mayfield from afar. Obviously, you nor I, we're not in the locker room. But I like the way Baker Mayfield presents himself with his teammates and carries himself with the group. I think that's really important. Leadership to me is something that, you know, talent, the most talented quarterback is not the most successful quarterback usually. It comes down to having leadership. You can't be empty at the position. It's a lot of times what's in your heart, what's in your head, how you deal with people around you. And I like that from Baker Mayfield. I like that he hangs out with the offensive line, right? He took the offensive line on vacation before the season. Little things like that. That's what a franchise guy does. So I really appreciate that. And also the big thing that I think, in terms of really on the field that you talked about is minimal mistakes. He's really cut his mistakes just from his own personal growth and being able to cut his mistakes from years past to this year.
One comment talks about how Baker's at his ceiling with us. I mean, if his ceiling is not turning the ball over and throwing a pretty healthy amount of touchdowns, I'll take it. I'll
Can
sorry.
I jump in?
Yeah.
Comment really quick? I think that's exactly right. I think you're super right. Right now, I think what you're seeing from Baker Mayfield is his ceiling. And it's just whether or not you're willing to accept that, I guess. But go ahead. You go.
Yeah. And then the clack follows up by saying Baker is fool's gold or that new snake oil. Choose one. I am gonna disagree. I'll talk about this in a moment, but what I've liked from Baker Mayfield so far this year, his pocket presence, I feel like has been pretty solid overall. His ability to extend plays and even scramble a little bit has been pretty impressive and something that we haven't seen since Jameis Winston was quarterback of the Bucs. I always am going to love a quarterback who doesn't have a lot of turnovers. I'm always going to. That is always, for me, going to be a top priority and for any quarterback.
How come, James?
Well, come on. We all know why. Look, but even taking away, like the obvious, like if you don't turn the ball over, you're going to give yourself a better chance to win the game, right? And that's a good thing for any quarterback. I don't really care who the quarterback is. Like I'm fine with any quarterback not turning the ball over, right? And that's something we've seen from Baker this year, which is different than what we've seen the past couple of years, right? Is that the offensive scheme that he's in? Is Baker maybe turned a corner at the age of 28 years old, much like Geno Smith? I don't know. But we haven't seen a multiple interception game from Baker once this year. That's notable. That's good to me, right? So it's all these things that I think have just made Baker an entertaining quarterback to watch for the Bucs this year and has put him in a good spot halfway through the season. Now, Billy, let's talk about the bad. Some of the things that you have not liked from Baker so far this year. I'll go ahead and start. There have been times where Baker does tend to hold on to the football a little bit too long and take a sack when it might not be as necessary just to throw the football away. That has been something that has been a bit of a struggle. It's not necessarily anything Baker Mayfield can control, but the batted passes at the line of scrimmage have been a bit of an issue as well. And some people are going to point this out. Overthrows on deep balls have been a bit of an issue as well, where those have been some missed opportunities. Those are three things for me that have been a bit of an issue with Baker at quarterback. What do you think has been some issues there?
Yeah, I love your overthrows on deep balls is fair for sure. I love your point about batted passes. Honestly, like Baker Mayfield's short.
There's nothing he can do about that.
Right. There's a reason, Baker Mayfield is our height and most NFL quarterbacks are not. It's just an unfortunate reality. Like you kind of got to pick your poison. He is a guy who's playing on, a rather cheap 1-year contract for a reason. He's not perfect. He has his blemishes and he's definitely not going to grow. He is the height that he will be. The one thing that I think Baker Mayfield, really the biggest knock I could put on him is he's not, and it's just like it's a compliment insult. It's all kind of mushed into a sandwich. He's not good enough to overcome. So while he's never the problem, or most of the time, I should say, while he's not usually the problem, he's also not going to be your solution.
So I guess to clarify that, if the offense is bad throughout the whole game, Baker can't drag an offense to success. If the defense isn't playing well, Baker can't drag the team to success.
Baker's capable of overcoming some minor things. Like you see last week, Mike Evans has some drops, right? And you see 2 weeks ago against the Texans, the defense was terrible, but Baker Mayfield put the team in a position to win. But for the most part, he does need support. He needs help. He needs people around him to make some plays. And that's why I think the comment earlier about Baker Mayfield being at his peak is a really great point because Baker
Yep.
Mayfield won't be better than this at any point. It's just, can he maintain this? Because what we're seeing, I think, is good enough. It's just whether or not this level of play is a sustainable level of play for him. Is he going to dip? If he can stay where he is, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not the most glamorous production or level of production, but it's nothing to, scoff at the same time. So one of my biggest criticisms is Baker Mayfield certainly not a part of the problem on most NFL Sundays for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but he's also not usually going to be. He's not going to be part of the solution. He's, like you said, he's not going to drag the team. You know?
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to note. I will say this: a couple of things with the Texans game proved to me that Baker can lead a game-winning drive. Right?
Yeah.
He's not gonna. Well, I mean, some people have thought that he threw away that Atlanta Falcons game. That is fair, but also he has also proven to me that he can also lead a game-winning drive. Didn't work out in the end.
In that Atlanta Falcons game, he did lead the team down the field to kick the field goal that tied it, and he put them inside of with a 1st and goal to potentially get a touchdown to win it. Right? The defense, it was a bad game. It was an ugly game for the offense, but in the end, Baker Mayfield did get the team down the field to give them a chance. So kind of a similar, put in that situation.
Give and take.
He did. Yeah, he was able to get the team down the field.
Yeah. So overall, right? Overall, I do think that Baker is playing to a peak, right? Right now. You take a look at the stats. 14 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, Billy, 2,143 passing yards. Baker's on pace to probably have the second best season of his career, Billy. The only season that he had that was better would probably be his 2020 season where he went 11-5. That was the season where he defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers in the playoffs, right? That is something that, is peak Baker Mayfield, right? He can maybe if the team around him is good enough, he can probably win you double-digit games and take you to the playoffs. We've seen evidence of that, right? Billy,
He's done it in his career.
Huh?
He's done it in his career, earlier in his career with a good team, with a good Cleveland Browns team around him. He did that.
And it does come down to that question where you said it is a subjective thing, right? You could ask 20 people and everybody might have a different opinion, right?
Yeah.
What's so important for me, and I talked about this today on the Cannon Fire podcast, is Tom Brady was the quarterback before Baker Mayfield, right? That's what it was. Tom Brady is Tom Brady. He's fantastic, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows how good Tom Brady can be. You then go from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield. I feel, and I want your thoughts and opinions on this. And real quick before I ask, I'll ask the question, and then I want to read the super chat from Real Talk Perez, RTP. Love this dude. He also does content here on YouTube. But real quick, if Baker Mayfield was having this year, the year after the Bucs moved on from Jameis Winston, let's say, hypothetical scenario, Tom Brady goes back to New England, whatever, it is what it is, and Baker Mayfield is the guy after Jameis Winston, and he has this season he is having now. Would there be as much debate, or would people be ecstatic to have, in my opinion, an overall good stat line so far of 14 touchdowns to 5 interceptions? Real quick, Billy, I'm going to let you marinate on that question. I want to talk about Real Talk Perez real quick. Super chat, thank you again, brother. Greatly appreciate it. Top priority should not be TOs. It should be... Okay, hold on. There's 2 super chats here. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, RTP. Top priority should not be TOs. It should be can your quarterback put up points? He can't go down the field consistently because he's not accurate. He's not decisive to let go of the ball in NFL windows or to just run. And that was something that we talked about. Some of the things that we do not like in terms of Baker is the deep ball passing. The decisiveness in holding onto the ball too long, right? Those are two things that we had talked about as the iffy things, right? Top priority should not be TOs. It should be, can he have, or he, let's see. He has Evans, Chris Godwin, and a number one running back in space. Not hard to put up numbers. He's average stop with mediocrity. Okay for now, but upgrade next year. Again, that is something that is subjective. And to talk about putting up points, just to take a look at it, 20 or and I guess it depends on where your standard is, right? When the Bucs are scoring 20 or more points this year, they're 4-1, right? It depends on where you view like an average NFL or average to above average NFL offense. Right now, the Bucs are averaging 19.8 points per game. They're 22nd in the league. Okay, they're 8th in points allowed. We'll kind of dive into more of these super chats here in a minute, RTP. But Billy, I want your thoughts on that comment or that question I had asked you.
So, that was a really good comment, by the way, though, by Real Talk Perez. That was a cool comment.
We will bring it up in a moment. I want to dive into that more for sure.
I want to write that down really quick though, because that made me think of something.
Sure. Do you want to talk about that first? Let's talk about that first, because I have the question in my mind. So
sure. So points being prevalent over turnovers. Yeah, I mean, yes and no, right? Because if you value points exclusively and you don't put that value on turnovers, you wind up with like a little bit of what we had, right? I mean, Jameis Winston put up
a lot of points.
Jameis Winston put up yards. Like, there are just nonstop yards. Jameis Winston led the league in passing yards, 33 touchdowns his last year here, and the turnovers, 35 turnovers. So I realize that's an extreme, but you have to find the balance.
I will say this. The Bucs were 3rd in points for in 2019. They went 7-9 with Jameis. Yeah. They were 29th in points allowed.
But hold on. That's not a fair stat, because how many pick sixes are in there? How many times did defense get put on a short field? That's the very similar defense to the unit that dominated and helped the Bucs win the Super Bowl 1 year later. So a lot of that points allowed is how much of that is on the defense?
That's a good question, Billy. I will let you continue while I try and look up that stat.
That's a skewed stat. I just points are important, of course. You need points to win. Turnovers are like the number one defining factor in losing games, though. And to me, I think you could tie it. I think you could tie it right back into your question of, if Tom Brady wasn't here in 2020 and we went back to 2020 and took Baker Mayfield and just put him on this team and we're seeing these results, like Tom Brady, of course it's unfair to compare anybody to Tom Brady, but Tom Brady was microwave success, right? It was just an instant meal. Beautiful, delicious. You put it in the microwave, it comes out, you're like, wow, this is fantastic. We just won the Super Bowl, right? After you've experienced that microwave success, it's hard to motivate yourself to get up and go preheat the oven. But Baker Mayfield is what he's doing this year, whether you agree or disagree that he may be a long-term candidate to stay, in position of the Buccaneers as the Buccaneers starting quarterback. He's doing things that Buccaneers quarterbacks historically do not do. And at some point, there has to be an appreciation for, like, remember where you were, remember where you've been, and take a full scope of it. Tom Brady was great 3 seasons, but that's not a realistic barometer to compare everything to. That metric is unfair. That's the outlier, right? What are we talking about? We're talking about Jameis Winston, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Mike Glennon, McCown, Jeff Garcia. These are the names. Josh Freeman. These are the names. These are the people we're talking about. And Baker Mayfield, the way he's playing this year, even if he's playing at his peak, which I agree that he is, 14 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. It's almost a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Jameis Winston had people ready to pay him and keep him around. He's never even got a 2-to-1, never even gotten a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. in his entire tenure with the Buccaneers. I just think that yards and points, they're flashy. It's nice to score. It's nice to move the ball. It's really nice to not lose games, not have your quarterback be the reason you're losing games at the same time. And both things, it's tough to weigh them, but you have to weigh them. But James, you asked the question, and I go tell you, you're looking something up over there. What are you looking up?
I'm trying to look up how I'm trying to see if I can find the stat of how many points are scored off of turnovers in 2019.
Oof.
I don't know how I can find that stat, but I'm really trying.
How many pick sixes did James throw? He threw 6 or 7.
I don't know.
I believe it was six or
I think it
seven.
was 6 or 7, but point being,
Answer your own question because you posed the question. So I really am very curious how you would break it down.
I personally, in my opinion, I would be happy with the stats that we're seeing right now because again, what do you want? It's again, it kind of turns into a subjective, right? Of like, what do you value more, right? A quarterback who can throw a ton of touchdowns but may throw more interceptions, maybe like a Josh Allen's a good example of that.
Great example.
But I always prefer a guy who's going to be safer, in my opinion. Now, again, that's an extremely subjective thing. Do you want a super explosive offense, a high risk, high reward? Or do you want a low risk, low reward? Right? I don't know. I mean, I take low risk, low reward, or even let's just call it medium risk, low reward. Or shoot, sorry, low risk, medium reward. But there's a couple more comments here I want to read. Jameis didn't help his defense. This is just it's Jameis. I was reading this comment at first. It says RTP said this is just James in reverse. I was like, wait, what? I was like, what did I do? So scared to turn the ball over that we're suffering in points. This is a myth. Stafford won the Super Bowl throwing the most interceptions of all quarterbacks. I want to look into that real quick. But
What was it? I missed it.
Stafford won the Super Bowl throwing the most interceptions of all quarterbacks.
Oh, yes, that is true.
Okay.
That is true. But he did not throw, you know, Jameis Winston level interceptions. But yes, that is true. He led the league in picks that year. And Andrew Luck was always a very good quarterback who led the league in picks. It's not like you said, it's very subjective. It's I guess what you value as an individual. To me, I've ridden on the roller coaster and I've been a part of watching explosive offenses that could score for either team at a blink of an eye. And you're like, wow, we could score for 40 or we could score 3. And it's nice to go into games and know what you have. Like it's nice to have that level of understanding that, okay, this is what we're going to get most likely today.
No, I mean I agree with that. I'm trying to look up stats on the fly here. I don't know what RTP is. Uh, we're not comparing to Tom Brady here. I see. I feel like, and that's fair. Why do we keep talking about Jameis? Just because we don't want Baker doesn't mean we want Jameis either.
We're,
Well,
we're just talking. I think we're talking about Jameis, and because we're talking about Bucs quarterbacks, the other players who have been here at the position. Like that's the comparison.
and then also to the point of no, it's all good. No, you're good, RTP. No. The reason why we talk about Jameis is because that is a good example of in Josh Allen too. We can even talk about Josh Allen's a recent example, right? Let's just take Jameis Winston out of the conversation. Josh
Sure.
Allen is a good example here. A quarterback where the Bills have the number one offense right now, right? By most metrics, and they're 5-5.
Josh Allen leads in touchdown passes and he leads in picks.
So I mean, it's a give and take, right?
And I would
Now, obviously, the ideal situation is to have a quarterback who could throw 40 touchdowns and only throw 7 interceptions like Tom Brady, right?
yes.
But if you can't have that, if you could have one, which is a guy who's going to throw a lot of touchdowns and a lot of interceptions, or the other, which a guy who's going to throw an average amount of touchdowns and low amount of interceptions, which would you rather have? That's where you get into it being subjective, more subjective.
And the Josh Allen one's a great example because Josh Allen, I think most people who are probably watching this would take Josh Allen on the Bucs any day. They'd be like, yes, absolutely. But don't you think Buffalo Bills fans are really frustrated right now?
It can be
Like
frustrating.
that's not a happy place to be. They're not loving life. So it's like the grass is always greener. So you got to just if you get somebody who can do if you get somebody who could do, like you said, you're either or. If you can get someone who can do either or someone who can do or, it might be worth keeping them because there's a lot of guys who can't do anything, right? If the other end of the spectrum is you could have Zach Wilson or Justin Fields, and you could have players who can't move the ball and can't stop turning it over, or you can have a situation where you have no positives, right? There's no upside.
RTP makes a good comment here. He says if Jameis is 1 and Tom Brady is 100, then Baker is around 40 or 55. We need at least 60 or 70. So if there's a pendulum, right, and Jameis is on one end, let's say Jameis Josh Allen is on one end of this pendulum, and Brady's on the other end, right? Baker is somewhere in the middle of both,
Are you saying
leaning more towards Brady.
so? But you're saying that that on that scale, that's just the scale of conservative play.
On one end of the scale, you have the ultra conservative Tom Brady. That's 100, right? On the other end of the scale, you have gunslinging Favre, Josh Allen, Jameis Winston type of quarterback play. Okay, that's your 2. Okay, now right now, Baker, and I agree with this, is leaning more towards like 55, 40 to 55. I would say 55 is a good number. I would even, say, yeah, like 55 is good right now for where Baker's at, right? In terms of more so towards Brady. You want a guy who's at least a 60 or a 70, right? Now, that's obviously a guy who is, closer to that Brady spectrum, but that's going to be tough to find, That's,
Yeah.
and then you look to the draft, then you look to all those different types of things, right? What I would say, and I do want to bring this up because we are talking about it, what is your thought process on the idea of the Buccaneers drafting a quarterback in this upcoming draft? Even if let's talk about the idea of like, hey, they bring back Baker, right? They bring back Baker. Let's just say that's a thing,
Yeah.
right? Do you think they should still draft a quarterback?
I'm not opposed to the idea of if you think the right guy's there and you grab him. I'm not naive to the fact that Baker Mayfield, like I said, he's never going to be top 5. He's not that guy in that sense. Like he's not capable of that. So I'm not naive to that. And if someone falls who you really think could be that, fine. There's no disagreement here. I just think you're very liable to end up with nothing when you currently have something. So to me, I don't know. You're saying you need the 60 on that scale, and I respect that and I get it, but to me, I don't know, be patient, right? Baker Mayfield just got to a new team with a new offense with a guy who's never called plays before. His last 2 games are arguably his best. I think, let it play out. Let the season play out. I'm not opposed to drafting a quarterback. If we
Oh,
do, I don't know. I don't know if there's any reason to sign Baker if you're going to draft a quarterback. I think you should just move forward
I,
altogether then.
I wouldn't be opposed to it either, and I think that Bruce Arians put it best. Remember we read A Season in the Sun, Billy? We both read A Season in the Sun. It was when one of the first couple... And look, again, this is subjective. I want to say that enough times. Agree to disagree? It's a very subjective question, right? Extremely subjective. I want to point back to to A Season in the Sun, when there was discussion. It said in the book that the Bucs in the offseason had thought about the idea of bringing in Teddy Bridgewater before they focused in on Tom Brady. Why? Because Teddy Bridgewater didn't throw interceptions. He didn't turn the ball over. Okay? It matters. It does. Now, again, whether or not you value turnovers or gunslinging more, that can be a debate that can be had till the end of time, and I don't think I think that that's a situation where you're not going to get a clear answer, right?
You have you have in that example one of the gutsiest, most no risk it, no biscuit coaches of all time talking about bringing in Teddy Bridgewater, who where is he on the scale of Jameis Winston to Tom Brady? He's well below a 55. So that's a great pull on the spot, James. I give you a lot of credit for that. That was a great pull because it's a good point. Like Bruce Arians is someone who you think might be interested in being risky, and
Real
he was
quick,
adverse right there.
real quick, to Real Talk Perez's point, Baker doesn't even look as good as Geno did year one. What do you say to that? I'm happy you brought that up. In his first 9 games with the Seattle Seahawks, Baker Mayfield. Sorry, give me a minute. We're gonna end with this because we are running a little bit low on time here, and I got to go to a steakhouse. But real quick, I do want to read this super chat from Brutal's Bucs. Never as an NFL quarterback got favorable treatment of Baker. 1-4 the last 5 games, mid stats, only wins versus bad teams while having a top tier wide receiver duo and OTs. Pass pro with the defense holding most teams to under 20 points. We've talked about the idea of Baker. Thank you for the super chat, by the way. That is greatly appreciated. We have talked about the idea that this is probably peak Baker, right? We've talked about that. There is a good group around him. Could it get better? I think so. I mean, I think it could certainly be better. Your situations could always be better, right? But
Every player needs different things, like needs a different formula to be at their best self. And due to Baker Mayfield's height, having a strong interior line is really crucial. And that is where the Bucs are the weakest, unfortunately. But that really hurts him being it's unfortunate. One of the things you talked about, he's an undersized quarterback. And for undersized quarterbacks, how many years do we see the Saints have top tier guards and a center because Drew Brees likes to step up in that pocket to see the field? Having an undersized quarterback, it helps when you have interior strength, and that is where the Bucs struggle. So yes, on paper, and I couldn't agree more, the Bucs have a talented roster, but it's not exactly lined up for Baker Mayfield's particular skill set. That's not an excuse for the guy because they are a very talented group across the board. They've got weapons and decent tackles, but I just think that's something that specifically because of his height hinders him.
and it is give and take, right? Like to say 1-5 in the last 5 games, he was 3-1 in the first 4 games, right? So I mean, like there is give and take there where, okay, it is definitely hindsight right now in the past 5 games, but then
And
what about the first four?
are
Like
we are we putting the loss to the Houston Texans on Baker Mayfield? Like I understand quarterback wins is a stat, and wins are wins, losses are losses, but
point being though is I do understand.
disingenuous to say he underachieved in that game.
Yeah, point being though I do understand where Brutal's Bucks is coming from in terms of saying, um, so look, 42 guards and a center or just a taller, a better quarterback. Again, it is that's something we've talked about, right?
What was that comment? What was that comment?
So
I could,
look for 2 guards and a center or just a taller or better quarterback.
it's just easier to find two guards and a center, though. That's the problem. Quarterback is just so few. It's easy, much easier to find
Point,
interior linemen.
but we've kind of broken it down a little bit, right? Now it's getting a bit argumentative, but I want to talk about this. We talked about Geno Smith in his first 9 games. 15 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 2,199 passing yards on 283 attempts. Baker Mayfield, 305 attempts, 2,143 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Geno Smith had a quarterback rating of 107.2. Baker is at 93.7. Point being, though, is that it's pretty comparable, all things considered, to where Geno was at through his first 9 games and where Baker is currently at now. So it also, I guess, Geno Smith did have 1 rushing touchdown, but it is certainly comparable. Billy, I'm gonna go ahead and end with this, and then we'll go ahead and peace out here. Obviously, this is a topic that is still up for discussion, right? We're going to be getting a lot of different opinions, a lot of different guys, a lot of different just thought processes that are out there right now, right? And that's fine. That's part of the reason why we love doing stuff like this, live streams and videos and whatnot. It's fun to have these discussions. Let's end it with this, and I'll have everybody in the chat talk about this as well if you guys want to answer this question. What do you expect from Baker Mayfield throughout the remainder of this season, and what do you think ultimately the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to do after this year based on what you believe Baker Mayfield is going to do throughout the remainder of the season?
James, you start us off.
I will. Um, I think one, we will continue to see consistency from Baker, right? You look at Geno Smith's stats at the end of his year, because I know that that's a very good comparison that we can make. Um, in the regular season, Geno Smith finished with, give me one moment, 30 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. I think we could see Baker taking a couple off of each of that. Let's say 26 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Well, let's say 25 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. No, Billy. We're going to say 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, okay? That's what we're
Okay.
doing. Sorry, because I looked and that was the exact same number he had in his 2020 season. I was like, it's not 2020. It's 2023. Point being is, I think we're going to continue to see a stable Baker Mayfield, for lack of a better word, and a consistently decent Baker Mayfield. Is he going to blow the doors off the barn and throw 40 touchdowns and throw for 4,500 passing yards? No. Might he get to a 4,000 yards? Maybe 25 plus touchdowns and keep it below double-digit interceptions? Seems like it's trending that way. And if that does happen, based on what we know, one, I think the Buccaneers will be in contention for the NFC South at that point. If not, if they win 7 or 8 games and have a middling pick like they did in 2019, where you had like the 14th to 18th pick, something along those lines, 13th to 18th pick, something along those lines, I still think the Buccaneers consider keeping Baker Mayfield in that situation and should do so, right? Because it's tough to find quarterbacks that can put up numbers like that consistently. Does that remove the Tampa Bay Buccaneers from drafting a quarterback? Absolutely not, nor should it. Does that automatically mean Baker Mayfield is going to be the guy for the next 3+ years? No, nor should it, but it at least gives him a chance for the Bucs to consider that. What do you think?
For the rest of the year, I kind of agree on some of your points. I think more of the same. I think Baker Mayfield will continue to be not the main causation of the problem, but also not necessarily able to rise above it and be the solution. I would expect, barring something crazy, that Baker Mayfield keeps the Bucs in the hunt for at least until, the later parts of December. I don't think the Bucs they'll be over in that in the hunt category of the NFC playoff picture for a while, and have legitimately, because of the division they're in, definitely have an opportunity to get some tiebreakers and push themselves ahead of the competition and get in. You talked about it, and this would be, I guess, my kind of closing point. 4,000 yards. He's on pace for 4,000 yards. Mid to high 20s touchdowns and under 10 interceptions. If the Buccaneers drafted that quarterback, that's the quarterback you'd want to draft. Like, if we drafted a quarterback next year in the first round and that quarterback came in and gave you that production, that's the caliber of quarterback you'd be excited about. So to me, it's hard to parse out what Baker Mayfield's done in the past with what he's doing right now, because in your mind, you know what he did in the past. But sometimes you have to look at things in a vacuum and understand that situations are different. And if you got just a fresh-faced quarterback in Tampa Bay who gave you 4,000 yards every season and gave you under 10 interceptions with 25 to 30 touchdowns every year, that is one of the best quarterbacks the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have ever had. Just right there, pencil it in. It's somewhat unfortunate to say. I wish there's a laundry list of great quarterbacks who played in Tampa, but it's just not the case. That is, if you drafted that quarterback, you would feel pleased, you'd feel happy, you'd have the stadium filled, people would be wearing his jersey every Sunday. And I don't want it to come off like me and James are not necessarily the biggest Baker Mayfield fanboys. Like, I don't have a Baker Mayfield jersey hanging up on my wall or anything like that. It's just sometimes it's hard to be fair. And I feel like, you got to bring some of that like mentality of just fairness to a situation. Baker Mayfield is not what he was. Right now, he's playing above what he used to be. So if he can maintain that pace, it's a discussion point. And I just think I'm gonna leave it there. If we drafted a quarterback who gave us this level of production, would you be looking to draft another one?
To the point too, we just talked about Geno, right? If Baker does put up similar stats to Geno, the Seahawks locked Geno down for a 3-year deal.
Good
So
point.
obviously that is an organization that opted to not draft a quarterback versus keeping their guy. Now I'm gonna have to check. One guy I know they could have taken was Will Levis. They could have. Now people are gonna say this quarterback draft class is way better, and I agree, right? But you take a look at that draft. Seattle had the 9th overall pick in that draft. Are we at the 2022 draft? I was thinking the 2023 draft. Whoops. Seattle had the 5th overall pick. They obviously didn't get Anthony Richardson. They didn't get CJ Stroud. They didn't get Bryce Young. Okay. They had 2 first-round picks. They could have traded up in that situation and go out and get a quarterback if they really thought that they needed an upgrade over Geno. They could have drafted Will Levis was an option there. They decided to not do any of those things. They decided to build around the guy that they had in Geno Smith. Now, obviously, they did end up signing Geno on a long-term deal and whatnot. So it's like, okay, well then why? That's a bad example because then why would they do that? But
To your point, Geno Smith being a really good like comp for Baker Mayfield. Another like pretty solid comp would be Jared Goff. Jared Goff is the NFL's darling this year. And when he got to the Lions, he threw 19 touchdowns and 8 interceptions his first year, right? That's Baker Mayfield's on pace for a significantly better season than that. Even last year, when he was, the Lions were on their come up, he threw 29 touchdowns, 7 picks, 4,400 yards. That's very similar.
Jared Goff, by the way, 2,500 passing yards on 326 attempts, 14 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. A
So
7-2 record as well. So
thank you.
It is a
It's all optics.
yeah.
A lot of it's optics.
Yeah. It is an interesting situation. Right now, as it stands, I think Baker's in a good place. Bob, somebody brought up a good point. Bob Compton said, "Has it occurred to anyone that Baker will have more options than re-signing with the Bucs if they decide they want to re-sign him?" Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be an option, right? But we have a couple of interesting scenarios there, right? Where
Ooh, can I ask you a question, James?
yeah,
Because this is a little bit specific, but we were talking about, and this I got this from Bob, so thank you, Bob, for being my inspiration. If the Buccaneers were to be interested in re-signing Baker Mayfield and he's interested in returning, would you roll out a big money deal for Baker Mayfield, or would you expect him to kind of know his role as a pretty good but not great quarterback and offer him that level of contract?
wait, say it again.
If the Bucs decide to sign Baker, or they want to sign him, and Baker wants to come back, do you think the Buccaneers should roll out a big money contract for Baker Mayfield, fork over the dollars, or do you feel like they should expect him to understand that he's a pretty good, okay quarterback, not a great quarterback, and offer him like not lowball him, but offer him a contract that tiers him properly?
We'll have to wait till the remainder of the season. I'm not going to answer that
Oh,
right now. But it will be an interesting question to answer. Billy, we could be coming back next week and the entire wheels could fall off this situation and Baker throws 10 picks in a game and then we're all sad, okay? But I want to end it with this. You take a look at some of the top guys, and look, you can get good quarterbacks in a lot of different situations. Brock Purdy is a guy who is a starting quarterback right now. Derek Carr, like Geno Smith, like just listing out these starting quarterbacks. Sam Howell leads the league in passing yards, guys. Like there's quarterbacks that come from different walks of life, and just because you get this new and improved shiny first round quarterback does not mean it's going to be a guarantee, right? And that's also another important thing to remember. Does it give yourself another chance? Yeah, for sure. But look right now at starting quarterbacks in the league. Geno Smith is a starting quarterback. Derek Carr, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, Sam Howell is out there. like those are all guys that are above Baker Mayfield right now in terms of passing yards and in some cases passing touchdowns and whatnot. It,
Derek Carr in the season, 10 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, significantly less explosive.
the guys that Baker's playing better than Trevor Lawrence, former number 1 overall pick, Matthew Stafford, having a bit of a down year, but former number 1 overall pick, Mac Jones, first round pick, Jordan Love, first round pick, Zach Wilson, number 2 overall pick.
John Watson, highest paid quarterback.
You know, Deshaun Watson, you know, he's obviously been hurt. Justin Fields, former first round pick. Daniel Jones, former first round pick. He got hurt, obviously. But point being is that, and I know obviously Baker Mayfield's a former first round pick of his own. But point being is that all these guys who are also highly touted quarterbacks who were supposed to be the upgrade saviors to their quarterback rooms, they are also not necessarily panning out the way their organizations thought they were this year either. I think it's important to note. I think it's important to note that, like, if you do get some good quarterback play, it's like having a good left tackle. You know, like it's tough to find those guys whenever they're there. It's tough to find a quarterback who doesn't turn over the football or is able to put up good quarterback play, right? That's why teams are always searching. Right now, Baker Mayfield is putting up good quarterback play. Not great, but good.
Yes.
And I think the Buccaneers would and probably should consider keeping Baker. So that's kind of my thoughts there. Billy, do you have any final words before we go ahead and head out on this very divisive topic?
No, I agree. Well, you said a whole mouthful there with
I said a lot of words.
Could and should. But I think, yeah, it's hard to find a decent quarterback. And if you give up on decent guys, you could wind up with guys that are, like we said before, you could wind up with Zach Wilson. You could wind up with a guy like Justin Fields. You could wind up in a dark, bottomless pit very, very quickly. It is very hard to come around a decent quarterback. James, you made a point about a decent left tackle, a decent kicker. Certain positions, it's just hard to come by quality starters. And yes, it's nice to have elite starters at those positions, but if you can find quality starters generally in the NFL, you hold on to them. It's just what you do.
Yeah. Switch Baker with any other quarterbacks, and who do you think is going to do the same with different weapons? That's with the same weapons? Is that what we're switch Baker with any other quarterback? Who do you think is going to do the same with the same weapons? Like out of all those guys that we talked about, I don't know. Like in the case of, I'm a little confused on that question.
If I'm understanding it correctly, I will go out on a limb and say I think the Buccaneers are worse right now if they have Derek Carr, and that was a guy a lot of people thought the Bucs should pay money to this offseason. I think Derek Carr would be a worse fit for the team right now.
I mean, you look like Jared Goff has pretty good weapons. It isn't. I don't think it's fair to say that the Bucs have the best offensive surrounding cast in the entire NFL. Like that's just not. I don't think that that's 100%. Like they have the best offensive group for a quarterback in the NFL. I don't think that's 100% accurate. It might have been back in like 2020 whenever they had Antonio Brown. Definitely. Then, like, hell, put anybody in there. Billy, me, you, and Real Talk Perez, and shoot, everybody in the chat, we could all go in there and ball out, right?
James, Real Talk Perez would have lit it up.
That's facts. No, I do believe that. I do believe that. But, it's just, you know, like, you look at some of the guys now, like Derek Carr. I thought Michael Thomas was a good weapon. I thought Alvin Kamara was a beast of a weapon. I thought, you know, like
Olave.
Yeah, like Olave, Taysom Hill, Geno Smith's got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba.
Good run game.
Jared Goff's got Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's got Sam Laporta, who's having a really good year. He got the Jameson Williams guy. He's got some other good guys around him. He's got Montgomery and Gibbs.
Yeah.
You know, so like, yeah, like quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk was supposed to be amazing, and all these other guys that they had brought in, right?
Travis Etienne.
Stafford, Puka Nacua, I thought was a god. Higbee's a good type. You know, point being though is that it's not just an automatic plug and play. Any quarterback can succeed in this offense, right? I think that's fair to say. But we're gonna go ahead and end this off because I got a lot of people texting me. By the way, everybody, thank you for the super chats. Tomorrow's my birthday. Woo! I don't think I'm gonna be doing something live tomorrow. I don't think. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see, Billy. You want to hop on
Everybody,
tomorrow?
happy birthdays in the chat for James.
Wait, say again.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to... Could you imagine like a sad like happy birthday to me? But no, listen, we've had a lot of fun today in today's live stream, guys. I appreciate that. Thank you guys so much for the super chats. It is greatly appreciated as well. Billy, thank you so much for being on. I greatly appreciate it.
Of course, man.
And folks, we'll see you in the next live stream or the next video. But until then, and as always, guys, see you soon. Goodbye for now, and go Bucs.